Next on Currents News, President Donald Trump is making headlines, answering questions about the China trade war, and a lot more as the G7 summit wraps up in France. The Amazon fire disaster is another top issue for the world leaders at the summit and for Pope Francis at the Vatican. I'll report on what the Holy Father is saying. A Jesuit volunteer murdered in the Philippines and her colleagues stabbed. The organization they worked for has a presence in the Brooklyn diocese. Plus, a storm churning in the Atlantic is forecast to become the first hurricane of the season as soon as tomorrow. Puerto Rico and Florida are targets. The news starts right now. Good evening, I'm Emily Druby. The summit to tackle the world's biggest problems is over tonight. Topping the agenda, the China trade war, tensions with Iran, and the Amazon fires. President Donald Trump made a lot of headlines about those hot-button issues. Whitney Wild reports the very latest of the wrap-up of the G7 summit.
I think we're going to make a deal with China, and I think eventually we're going to make a deal with Iran, too.
The G7 summit wrapping Monday with President Trump signaling possible deals that would end the trade war with China.
I believe it more strongly now than I would have believed it a while ago.
And perhaps reestablish a nuclear agreement with Iran.
We're looking for no nuclear weapons, no ballistic missiles, and a longer period of time.
During a 30-minute press conference, Trump said he's more hopeful for a deal after China's vice premier called for a calm attitude in negotiations. It's a shift in tone after a weekend that saw China and the U.S. threatening increased tariffs on one another's imported goods.
Are you now ready to make a deal?
Only if it's a fair deal and a good deal for the United States. Otherwise, I will not make a deal.
Trump also applied cautious confidence to international security, saying he may be willing to meet with Iran.
If the circumstances were correct or the right, I would certainly agree to that. But in the meantime, they have to be good players.
Despite the president's positive tone, what, if any, deals will materialize remains unclear. In Washington, Whitney Wild, Currents News.
The G7 summiteers are vowing action tonight to confront the disastrous fires burning through the Amazon rainforest. The flames ripping into the lungs of the world are being called a global crisis. Camila Bernal is in Manaus, Brazil, with the story.
Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro initially shrugging off these fires, then announcing the deployment of more than 40,000 troops to come to this area and fight the flames. Here in Manaus, a major departing point to the surrounding Amazon, people are anxious. They're waiting to see exactly what these troops are going to do and how quickly they're going to help, because for them, this is not just a story about the environment. For them, this is also a political problem. Aerial images showing the planet's lungs in flames. The smoke so thick that cameras struggle to capture the devastation.
This is not just a forest burning. This is almost a cemetery because all you can see is dead.
A line of fire continuing to move and expand in some areas. But this weekend, G7 leaders vowing to help contain the flames.
There is a true convergence to say that we all agreed to help as quickly as possible the countries that were affected by these fires.
Brazil's President Jair Bolsonaro announcing the deployment of more than 40,000 troops to the Amazon that will help fight the fires. This after repeated denials that the fires posed a threat to the most biodiverse ecoregion on the planet. For some, the president's actions are long overdue. NGOs in the country blaming Bolsonaro for scaling back on environmental regulations that have likely encouraged deforestation by loggers and ranchers.
Right now, with the onslaught of climate change mixed with homesteading and mining and all that contributing deforestation, Brazil is on the verge to lose probably 60% of its remaining habitat within under a decade.
And the country's Space and Research Center says they're seeing about 80,000 fires throughout the year burning in Brazil. They say that's an increase of about 80% compared to the year before. Fortunately, French President Emmanuel Macron announcing $20 million in emergency aid for Brazil. But our teams here in the air say they are not seeing an increase in military presence. Reporting in Manaus, Brazil, I'm Camila Bernal. Back to you.
Thank you, Camila. Pope Francis is praying that the Amazon fires are contained quickly. The Holy Father urging everyone to work towards that goal because the rainforest is crucial to the planet. The pontiff is leading worldwide Catholic concern about the disaster. While addressing thousands of pilgrims in St. Peter's Square, Pope Francis expressing his deep concern about the Amazon fires.
Preghiamo perché con l'impegno di tutti siano domati al più presto. Quel polmone di foreste è vitale per il nostro pianeta.
The Amazon produces about 20% of the globe's oxygen and is often referred to as the lungs of the world. As the fire rages on, Catholics around the globe have been speaking out. Catholic bishops of Latin America issuing a joint statement reading, "What happens to the Amazon is not just a local issue, but of global reach," adding, "If the Amazon suffers, the whole world suffers." The bishops further urging the governments of Amazon countries to take measures to save the rainforest from these blazes. The Secretary General of the Mexican Bishops' Conference, Bishop Alfonso Miranda, tweeting out, "It is not just a regional emergency, it's a catastrophe that urgently requires international aid," asking for help in the form of prayers or technological resources. Cardinal Blaise Cupich of Chicago echoing that sentiment in a 5-part tweet saying, quote, "This threatens the indigenous peoples living in the region. It threatens every person on the planet," adding, "This grave threat to the planet demands the attention and cooperation of world leaders." Bishop Rick Sicca of Knoxville, Tennessee, also tweeting about the fire, sarcastically referencing climate change deniers, saying, "No such thing as climate change. Amazon is burning in the hottest July on record." The United States Conference of Catholic Bishops has not yet issued a statement. The Holy Father is convening a major Vatican summit on the Amazon region. The global meeting is scheduled for this October in Rome. The gathering plans to discuss the plight of the indigenous living in the area and deforestation. New tensions between the United States and Russia could be brewing tonight over military tests. Claiming they're training for combat, the Kremlin launched 2 ballistic missiles from nuclear submarines this weekend. The weapons were fired off in the Arctic Ocean and the Barents Sea. Moscow said the tests were successful and the missiles destroyed their targets. About 2 weeks ago, a mysterious explosion in Russia killed 5 nuclear specialists. News tonight from the Philippines that an attack on Jesuit volunteers has left 1 woman dead and another hospitalized with serious stab wounds. The Catholics were part of the Jesuit Volunteer Philippines Foundation, where lay people spend a year or more doing community service. The nonprofit Jesuit Volunteer Corps has a presence in the Brooklyn Diocese. Kearns News' Tim Harfman reports on the sorrow being felt here at home.
I feel incredibly sad for, especially for the family of the young woman that was killed. It's extremely unfortunate.
The reaction from a Jesuit Brooklyn priest after hearing the news of Friday's attacks. 2 women volunteering with Jesuits in the Philippines stabbed. 24-year-old Jennifer Buckley is dead. Her 30-year-old colleague Anne Kathleen Gadula is hospitalized with serious wounds. The violence coming when the women surprised their attacker ransacking their lodgings in the southern Philippines province of Bukidnon. Father Mario Powell, president of Brooklyn Jesuit Prep in Crown Heights, calls Jennifer a martyr.
I think absolutely, in my mind, qualifies it as this young woman was living out her faith and she was killed for it.
There is a Jesuit volunteer presence in the Brooklyn Diocese. 2 service members are helping immigrant families receive health benefits and housing. Father Powell says volunteers are usually lay men and women who recently graduated from Jesuit schools and want to help others in need.
They're young, they're impressionable, they're excited, and they have a spirituality that they understand that they're volunteering and they're going to be living in community because of their faith in God.
And Father Powell says the volunteers are always thinking of the needy and marginalized before themselves.
Jesuit volunteers throughout the world sacrifice a lot. They live very simply. They live in community with one another, which is not easy. They work in communities that are difficult, and they give and oftentimes don't count the cost.
In Brooklyn, Tim Harfman, Kearns News.
Hong Kong is reported calm at this hour after new violence erupted over the weekend. At one point, riot police fired off a gun. The shot didn't hit anyone, but tensions between law enforcement and pro-democracy demonstrations are sky high. Tear gas was used and water cannon trucks were on the streets. Catholics joined the demonstrations, calling them a march for freedom. The nearly 4 months of protest are aimed at the Chinese government in Hong Kong and on the mainland. A strengthening storm is heading towards the U.S. tonight and could be the year's first hurricane by tomorrow. Tropical storm Durian is making a beeline to Puerto Rico, and the National Hurricane Center is predicting that when it hits, it'll be a Category 1 hurricane. The forecasters are warning that if Durian stays on track, it could make landfall in Florida by the weekend. U.S. Supreme Court Justice Ruth Ginsburg appeared strong this morning as she accepted an honorary degree from the University of Buffalo. This was her first public appearance since it was announced that she finished treatment for pancreatic cancer. The 86-year-old justice underwent 3 weeks of radiation therapy at Sloan Kettering Hospital for the tumor on her pancreas. Doctors have said no evidence of the disease remains. Stay right here with Kearns News for stories you won't see anywhere else. A Catholic church is suffering tonight after a record-breaking immigration raid, the latest on what's happening in the parish. Voices of hope are raised at a commemoration of the big stain on America's history, and the dramatic moment when a woman thought it was her time to go. Do you have a story idea or want to share a tip? Email us at newstips@desalesmedia.org or call our 24-hour number 718-517-3122. We'll be right back. Breaking news about the opioid crisis. A judge in Oklahoma is ruling against corporate giant Johnson & Johnson and ordering them to pay the state more than $500 million. The trial is the first state proceeding to hold a pharmaceutical company accountable for the opioid epidemic, one of the worst in the nation's history. The state argued Johnson & Johnson aggressively marketed opioids to doctors and patients as safe and effective painkillers. Opioid makers, distributors, and retailers are facing more than 2,000 similar lawsuits around the country. A ban on abortion is being challenged today in court. Missouri's new law is scheduled to take effect this week. It prevents any abortions at or after 8 weeks of pregnancy. Planned Parenthood wants a federal judge to put the law on hold while their legal action against it plays out. The measure includes exceptions for medical emergencies, but not for rape or incest. The law is set to take effect Wednesday. A hotline for detained immigrants is no longer operating tonight after it was featured on a TV program. Migrants in detention centers could use the toll-free number to contact lawyers, but after it was featured on the television show, ICE pulled the plug. The group that ran the phone system, Freedom for Immigrants, is demanding the hotline be restored, accusing immigration officials of choking off free speech. A Catholic parish is suffering a big loss tonight after a record-breaking ICE raid. Immigration agents swept up hundreds of workers at Mississippi food plants recently. It was the largest single state raid ever. For one church, that means half the congregation is gone. Nick Valencia reports the impact is ongoing.
It's the start of Thursday Mass in Forest, Mississippi, and Father Roberto Mena is trying hard not to show it, but he is worried. Today, the pews are mostly empty. 2 weeks ago, ICE agents carried out one of the largest raids in American history, and they took as many as 150 people from his congregation. Every one of those left have been impacted by what happened. Father Mena tries to reassure his parishioners that they're going to be okay, though even he admits since the raids, most of his dreams have been nightmares. As Mass ends, parishioners are encouraged to pray to God out loud. This woman pleads to God for parents to be reunited with their children. It's a desperate prayer, but for many, faith is all that's left. Gaspar Gomez Pablo says he needs help with an attorney. Along with his wife, the 33-year-old was detained in the recent raids at Cook Foods. While he was released with an ankle monitor, his wife is still being held. Though they've lived in the U.S. for more than 10 years, both of their futures, he says, are uncertain. He tells me his children are sad, that they don't eat much, and ask about their mom. They want to know when she'll be back. For his 10-year-old, the pain of being without his mom is just too much.
Do you know where your mom is? You're sad? It's hard, huh? I'm sorry.
I see now the Hispanics are living the same kind of discrimination and racism that others faced in the past.
Father Mena tells me no one in the community seemed to be prepared for the possibility of a raid or the chance that their family might be split up.
For me, separating families is the work of the evil one among us. This is something I don't understand, why they want to divide families. And they are families that they are contributing to this country. All of them, they pay taxes and they are connected to this culture.
It's a hard thing for many here to understand, but especially the children.
If you could tell your mom something, what would you tell her?
I miss her.
Catholic leaders across the country criticized the raids. Tonight, at least 70 people in detention are facing charges of illegal re-entry into the U.S. as well as falsifying documents. New information tonight shows that Americans are shifting on what values matter most. Younger generations are rating patriotism, religion, and having children as less important now than 2 decades ago. According to a new Wall Street Journal NBC News poll, 61% say patriotism is very important, but that's down 9 points. The same with religion. While 50% cite religion as essential to the national character, that's down 12 points. And 43% placed a high value on having children, a decline of 16 points. The United States has changed a lot over the centuries. 400 years ago this month, the painful era of American slavery began when enslaved Africans arrived at a port that is now Hampton, Virginia. This weekend, thousands of people offered up prayers in their memory. Natasha Chen reports.
Say something, thanking them for their sacrifice.
In the same spot where about 20 captured Africans arrived 4 centuries ago, people whispered prayers to them and to the ancestors who did not survive the voyage, sending those thoughts floating with flower petals into the Chesapeake Bay.
The ghost of the past is still alive with us today, and you can feel it as you walk around and look at the backdrop here.
Under the backdrop of Fort Monroe, people felt what shackles would have been like and took pictures at this historic marker where the ship White Lion arrived. Asia Leeds, co-director of African Diaspora Studies at Spelman College, says this wasn't the first group of Africans in America. There were others already taken to what were then Spanish, Portuguese, and French territories. But this does mark the first arrival to English North America.
It marks a beginning of the foundations of this nation, and of which slavery is deeply embedded. So we have the beginnings of not just U.S. governing systems, right, that emerge out of this colonial history, but also the foundations of American wealth.
And now African Americans can be part of that wealth in spite of continued struggles of inequality.
Now we're engineers, lawyers, doctors, presidents, maybe a future female president, but we've come a long way.
And while they look at the traditions that made them who they are, the next generation is also looking at what their world could be.
Imagine the problems that would be solved if all people were kind and felt cared for. It doesn't matter what your race or religion may be. We all deserve kindness.
Can we talk about where we're going? And can we talk about what is necessary to get there as we look at the next 400 years?
Natasha Chen, Hampton, Virginia.
Still to come on Currents News, we'll tell you what a wheelchair-bound woman did when she saw an out-of-control car heading straight for her. There's a dozen new columns now installed at the Vatican. The story of why they are there is ahead. An Arizona woman is thanking God after a close encounter with an out-of-control car. The video from a surveillance camera is showing Laura Smith rolling down the street in her wheelchair when the speeding car narrowly misses her before smashing through a bus stop and crashing into a gas station. Laura had a lot on her mind as the car headed straight for her.
Well, I guess it's time for me to go. Here I come, Lord. I thought it was going to take me out, but whew, it didn't.
The driver blamed bad brakes for the crash. The cops are saying no one was seriously injured, including the two men who went flying through the air when the crash occurred. Cars are the reason why new columns are sprouting up at the Vatican, and it all has to do with the church's mission to protect the environment. Changes are coming to the way people are getting around. Melissa Butts has the story.
According to the United Nations, traditional transport annually emits around 8 gigatons of carbon emissions into the atmosphere, a figure that could double by 2040 and accelerate climate change. One state promoting initiatives to reduce air pollution is the smallest in the world, the Vatican. They've already installed 12 charging towers for electric cars within the Vatican state.
Following the spirit of papal encyclicals, the Vatican began to equip itself with electric cars. The Vatican has signed an agreement with NLX to provide us with a network of electric charging columns.
At the end of the year, Roberto Mignucci, the Vatican's technical director, expects around 20 of these columns to be installed inside the state. The 22-kilowatt charging stations allow up to 2 cars to be recharged at the same time. Its use is simple. Present a card and connect the vehicle to the column.
This is a very important initiative. It is the forerunner of a great project that includes the use of electric cars throughout the Vatican, only electric.
Thus, very soon, Pope Francis could be riding around in an electric Pope-mobile, like the one he used on his trip to Colombia. This initiative is a way to materialize the content popes have written about on care of the environment.
John Paul II already referred to the care of creation, a message ratified by Pope Benedict XVI, and finishing with Laudato Si. We begin to combine all the works. We are covering everything at 360 degrees, not only concerned about pollution generated by cars, but also a whole series of systems with energy and water, conservation, photovoltaic, etc.
For many, these initiatives in a territory of 108 acres does not represent a significant impact. However, like a small drop of water in the middle of the ocean, the Vatican wants to be a pioneer among the countries of the world. In Rome, Melissa Butts, Kearns News.
Finally tonight, a 99-year-old woman is proving it's never too late to follow your dreams. Catherine Kyle is a Pennsylvania native and a lifetime Pittsburgh Pirates fan. For decades, she's wanted to see a baseball game. She's about to celebrate her 99th birthday, and her family made her wish come true Saturday, surprising her with a trip to the ballpark where Catherine wanted to hear something special.
Bunch of nice guys, I think. What I want to do is hear them sing, "Take Me Out to the Ball Game." It's 7th inning.
And we are happy to report that they did play "Take Me Out to the Ball Game." The Pirates also shut out the Cincinnati Reds 14-0. Not bad for her first game. That is Kearns News. I'm Emily Drewby. Thank you for joining us because we are putting your faith in the news. Hope to see you again next time.